Okay, so here is a very specific kind of irony that history keeps serving up. Some people are so brilliant, so far ahead of their time, that they build the one thing that makes them famous, and then that exact thing turns around and kills them. A parachute, a lighthouse, a printing press, even a torture device. These are the inventors who were destroyed by their own creations. Buckle up, because this one has some seriously dark poetry to it. Let's start with maybe the unluckiest genius who ever lived, Thomas Midgley Jr. This guy was a chemist in the 1920s, and he was good, award-winning good. He solved two of the biggest engineering problems of his entire era. The catch: both of his brilliant solutions turned out to be among the most destructive inventions in all of human history. First, he figured out how to stop car engines from knocking by adding lead to gasoline. Leaded gas. He knew it was toxic. He literally got lead poisoning while demonstrating how safe it supposedly was. It went on to poison the air of the entire planet for decades. Then, for an encore, he invented the chemicals that tore a hole in the ozone layer. One historian said he had more impact on the atmosphere than any single organism in Earth's history. But here is the part nobody sees coming. At 51, Midgley caught polio and lost the use of his legs. So, being an inventor, he built himself an elaborate system of ropes and pulleys to lift himself out of bed on his own. And one morning in 1944, he got tangled in his own contraption. The ropes wrapped around his neck, and the man who poisoned the world was strangled to death by his final invention. Next up, the flying tailor. Franz Reichelt was an Austrian tailor living in Paris, and he had one obsession: inventing a wearable parachute. A suit you could simply put on that would let you float safely down from any height. He tested his designs by throwing dummies off of buildings. They did not go well. Every single prototype failed. But Franz was convinced the problem was the dummies, not his design. So in 1912, he got official permission to test his parachute suit using a dummy from the first deck of the Eiffel Tower. Newsreel cameras showed up. A crowd gathered below. And then Franz climbed up onto the railing, wearing the suit himself. His friends begged him to use the dummy. He refused. He hesitated at the very edge for almost a full minute, and then he jumped. The suit didn't open. He fell over 60 meters and hit the frozen ground so hard he left a hole in the dirt. And the worst part? The cameras caught all of it. People still watch that footage today. Now let's rewind to the year 1698. Henry Winstanley was an English inventor and merchant who lost two of his ships on a vicious reef off the coast of Plymouth. So he decided to do something nobody had ever done: build a lighthouse right on the rocks, out in the open sea. The Eddystone Lighthouse. Everyone told him it was impossible, but he actually did it. And Winstanley was so proud, so completely certain of his creation, that he made a very bold statement. He said his single greatest wish was to be inside his lighthouse during, and I quote, the greatest storm that there ever was. He wanted to feel it hold against the sea. That, my friends, is what we call tempting fate. And in November of 1703, he got his wish. The Great Storm of 1703, the single worst storm in all of English recorded history, slammed into the coast. Winstanley happened to be inside the lighthouse doing repairs when it hit. By the next morning, the lighthouse was simply gone, swept completely into the sea. No trace of Winstanley or the 5 other men inside was ever found. This next one is a genuine tragedy. Horace Wells was a dentist in the 1840s, and he pioneered something that changed medicine forever: anesthesia. He realized laughing gas could let you pull a tooth with absolutely zero pain. Before him, surgery meant being held down while you screamed. He was about to become one of the most important men in all of medicine. But his big public demonstration went wrong. The gas wore off too early, the patient cried out in pain, and the whole crowd of doctors booed him off as a fraud. Humiliated, Wells kept experimenting on himself with the anesthetics, especially chloroform. And chloroform is really not something you want to be self-administering. Every single day. He became addicted, and his mind slowly came apart. In a chloroform-induced delirium, he ran into the street and threw acid at 2 women. He was arrested and thrown into a New York jail cell. When the fog finally cleared and he understood what he had done, the shame was unbearable. He took his own life in the cell at just 33 years old. Days later, the medical societies declared him a pioneer of anesthesia. Okay, meet the glider king. Otto Lilienthal was a German engineer in the 1890s, and he was obsessed with one thing humans had dreamed about forever: real flight. Not floating in a balloon, actual wings. He built glider after glider after glider and threw himself off of hills strapped underneath them. And it actually worked. Otto made over 2,000 flights. He was the first person in history to make repeated, controlled glides, real, documented, honest-to-goodness flight. Newspapers all over the world printed photos of a man hanging in the open air beneath white wings. And 2 teenage brothers in America named Reichelt saw those photos, and it lit a fire inside them. But gliding in 1896 was brutally dangerous. On a summer day, Otto's glider caught a sudden gust of wind, stalled in the air, and dropped from about 15 meters. He broke his spine, and he died the very next day. His last words became famous around the world. He simply said, "Sacrifices must be made." 7 years later, the Wright brothers, standing on his shoulders, finally flew. Ever wonder how newspapers went from a slow trickle to millions of copies a day? A lot of that is thanks to a man named William Bullock. In 1863, he invented the web rotary printing press, a machine that fed in a giant roll of paper and printed on both sides at absolutely insane speed. It basically created the entire modern news industry overnight. The press was a beast, huge, fast, and packed with spinning gears and heavy rollers. And Bullock absolutely loved tinkering with his machines while they were still running. So one day in 1867, he was adjusting one of his presses in Philadelphia, and he tried to kick a driving belt back into place with his foot. His leg got caught and dragged into the machine, and it was badly crushed. Over the next few days, the crushed leg turned gangrenous. The doctors decided they had no choice but to amputate to save his life. And on the operating table, during the amputation of the very leg his own invention had mangled, William Bullock died. All right, for this one we're going way, way back, ancient Sicily, around 560 BC. There was a tyrant named Phalaris who was famous across the ancient world for his cruelty. And a bronze worker named Perillos came to him with a business pitch, a brand new way to execute people. He had invented a torture device, and he was extremely proud of it. It was a life-sized hollow bowl, cast entirely in bronze. You would lock a person inside it, light a fire underneath, and slowly roast them alive. But Perillos added one truly sick little flourish, a system of tubes in the bull's head that turned the victim's screams into sounds like a bellowing bull. He presented it to the tyrant, fully expecting a huge reward. Phalaris looked at this horrifying device, and then at the smiling man who had built it, and he decided to test it. He asked Perillos to climb inside and demonstrate exactly how the screaming tubes worked. And the moment the inventor was in, they sealed the bowl shut and lit the fire beneath him. The man who invented the Brazen Bull became the very first person it ever killed. Even the ancient Greeks called that poetic justice. Last one, Sylvester Roper was an American inventor, and back in the 1860s, he built something that had simply never existed before, a machine that moved on 2 wheels under its own power. A steam-powered velocipede, basically one of the very first motorcycles in the world, and it was decades ahead of its time. By 1896, at 72 years old, Roper was still riding his machines, and they were fast. On a bicycle racing track in Boston, he took his steam velocipede out to see just how quickly it could go, pacing the fastest cyclists of the day. Witnesses said he hit around 40 miles an hour. For that era, that was absolutely terrifying speed. And then the machine wobbled, veered offline, and crashed. When they reached him, they realized he may have already been gone before he even hit the ground. His heart had given out at speed. Doctors honestly couldn't say whether the machine killed him or the sheer thrill of it did. Either way, Sylvester Roper died on the very motorcycle he invented, going faster than anyone thought a person could. So what do we actually make of all this? Maybe it's just cold chance, build enough dangerous things, and eventually the odds catch up with you. Or maybe there's a quieter lesson buried in here about the very fine line between genius and hubris. Every single one of these people looked at the impossible and said, I can build that. And they were right. It's just that the thing they built didn't care at all who made it. If this kind of dark history is your thing, follow along. There's a whole lot more the history books left out.